All right. Hello, YouTube. This is JT Viper with a significantly deeper voice than usual, and I assure you it is not by choice. You see, I was at a party over the weekend and I got myself, well, I think if you were following my Twitter feed that night, you will realize that I was feeling no pain and got myself pretty sideways. Unfortunately, whenever I tend to drink beyond moderation, I get a little loud. As I get a little loud, I tend to scratch up the old vocal cords. And so I think I've starting to come down with something. I do get throat infections fairly easily. Probably not good for someone who wants to do a whole lot of speaking. But anyway, I'm going to be drinking a lot of water here. But I want to cover a topic here that I got involved with on Twitter earlier today. I did promise a video on this subject, and this will have to suffice in the meantime before I can do one properly scripted, get all my thoughts out really nice and organized for you all. Now, the issue I'm bringing up tonight, as the title would indicate, is the topic of intimate partner relationships and how, at least I feel, all of this quote unquote yes means yes, affirmative consent, affirmative ongoing verbal consent being absolutely necessary. Otherwise it's sexual assault or it's rape or it's something else. This is a point that I believe has been covered in the past. I would really hope so. I can't think of any internet commentators who've covered it to quote them, but I do feel that I feel like I've heard this mentioned as well, and I feel that somebody must have. But just because I assume that somebody must have done something, and then I seem to remember something happening, doesn't seem like the best support for what I believe, for what I think. I've been known to be wrong. It would not be the first and will not be the last time. But in any case, roaming millennial, cheers to her as it were, brought up this point, serious question: how do feminists feel about nonverbal consent? Does consent have to mean literally saying yes, or do physical cues count? I do believe, and I'll look this up here, but I was going to have this. There we go. Yeah, Professor Marabian combined the statistical results of the two studies and came up with the now famous and famously misused rule that communication is only 7% verbal. But 93% is nonverbal. The nonverbal component was made up of body language, 55%, and tone of voice, 38%. So let's just say, shall we, if we go to Psychology Today, number of other sources, you'll get the same number. The belief is that 55% of communication is body language. 7% is the actual words spoken, 38% is the tone of voice. Whether it's the 93 or that 55, still a majority of communication done by human beings comes through body language, through physical cues, which I don't think anyone's going to have a problem with sharing those definitions, combining physical cues and body language. Actually, I would even go so far as to say that body language is not quite enough of a term to define the sort of physical cues that one will see and experience in an intimate relationship. Now, there is one thing in the article that Roaming Millennial has brought up here is about hookup culture. 5 problems with hookup culture and how to take it back from sexism. Not going down that road. We're staying here. I'm not talking about hookup culture today. It's been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. But it's not what I'm talking about. And what I would like to draw attention to are the comments by Ian Miles Chung. It says physical cues do not count. No. To which I asked, and again, I don't like going through a Twitter exchange most times. I find Twitter to be exceedingly annoying. Probably the worst platform for debate known to man, or any real discussion at all. But things here seemed concise enough to work with. Now I asked Ian if this was a representation of what he believes feminists, think as a whole or by majority, or whether it was his opinion. I did not want to mischaracterize him, and that was true. I did not want to react to what he had said or respond to what he had said without knowing whether or not that was legitimately his position or if he was simply identifying that which he believed to be the opinion of another person, another group, so on and so forth. To which he replied, well, it is whatever you want it to be. Now, I tried to get him to clarify, saying, no, it's not if I want to be accurate and fair in my statements moving forward. I got no further response from him. I have no way of taking what I want from that aside from him saying it is whatever I want it to be. I can only take the implication at this point, given his opportunity to specify, that it is both. It is both Ian's personal views on the subject, and it is also what Ian perceives to be the larger feminist agreement on the subject. So here's what I'm going to say. There are many ways that someone can convey their consent. Many ways. I made the sarcastic and, well, a little bit childish remark that, well, what about sign languages? Is that not valid? Sign language is technically a verbal cue. It is not spoken in the strictest of sense. It is not a verbal cue. It is a physical cue. Now, I understand some people will say, well, sign language blurs the line between the two. Same as what if you had it in writing? Would it matter? And that wasn't really the point of what I was saying. I was more or less making a petulant joke about the situation. But to the more serious end of the topic, I would like to draw your attention to a concept, to a hypothetical. A married couple wakes up in the morning. Man goes to, brush his teeth, standing there in front of the vanity mirror and whatnot. And his wife walks up behind him, kind of lays a hand on his shoulder and just kisses him lightly on the side of the cheek, side of the neck, whatever. Not a word is spoken. Has that woman just committed sexual assault or sexual harassment? Not a word spoken. She walks up, places a hand on his shoulder lovingly, leans over, kisses him on the side of the cheek, on the neck, whatever. Maybe she's a bit shorter, kisses him on the back of the shoulder blade. Who knows? It's a movie scene I'm sure we've all seen repeated in multiple rom-com types or movies in general. And it brings me to my next thought. When I think of the relationships that I've been in, there have been many times where verbal cues, an ongoing discussion, not so much as a question or two asked, The question was in the form of a physical cue, a specific type of touch, a lean, different things that we all establish based on context in our lives to mean various things. And these things all initiated a form of physical contact, whether by myself or by my then girlfriend. Why does a feminist or an independent commentator like Ian Miles Chung, who I hesitate to call an independent commentator for other reasons entirely, why do they get to determine what consent means between myself and my partner? Why do they get to determine whether or not an intimate experience between myself and a partner, let's say in an example that I won't go into details, of course, nothing too nitty gritty, but I dated one girl for just shy of 2 years. Lived with her and her family for a time when things at my home were not going well and I couldn't support myself outside of it. And we had a very serious relationship. We were bandying around the concept of a certain degree of permanence there. And there were absolutely times where not a word was spoken. We wake up or you're winding down the evening after, watching a movie, sitting on the couch, and somebody snuggles into somebody else, and somebody returns the affection with a kiss, and these things move forward from there. The question then becomes, who initiated it? Who initiated that snuggle? Are they the one? If they sat down and cuddled into you without asking you, was that a form of sexual assault? Was that a form of rape culture, of some sort of sexual harassment, inappropriate touching? Or has it not gone far enough yet? How about the person who gives the first kiss? This person, the one guilty of sexual assault. Did they initiate the unwanted contact? Because if it wasn't discussed, if there wasn't a question asked first, how could they know that the other person consented? Hmm? I find this infuriating because I believe that the intimate connection, the understanding, and the importance of prior communication between intimate partners and partners in general, everyone should strive to improve how they communicate with one another. I think that this sort of communication is extremely important and that the very special connection that develops between romantic partners over time is not something that should be taken so lightly or dismissed or denigrated so quickly by feminists and whatever Ian calls himself these days. You see, I believe that two people can be connected to a point wherein words need not be spoken, where they can just feel their way through an interaction, gleaning from physical cues how their partner wants them to react. And if the person has a certain degree of social intelligence, if they understand body language, if they understand these cues, if they have spent enough time together, this is why I actually believe that hookup culture can be rather damaging. a personal view, and I've been through that. I can't say that this isn't something isn't something that I haven't engaged in the past, but I can say, looking back on it, that it did skew and damage to an extent for a temporary period of time my outlook on human sexual interaction. Looking back at it now, I think of how important things like courtship are. I'm not talking the throw your jacket down, bring flowers, all the little intricacies that way, not the minutia. I mean the spending time to actually get to know somebody before you move your relationship from a spoken word social setting to a much more intimate and physical one. I think that it benefits both parties to establish a certain degree of understanding. I think that, at least from my own experience, doing this will inevitably improve the intimate relationships between those people. Because the communication, because a certain degree of communication amplifies the intimacy. But it doesn't need to occur. This communication, this verbal communication, does not need to occur prior to each individual action. And of course, we do get down into the minutia of it. Again, if you're going to say that physical cues do not count, no, don't count at all. We're going to fully eliminate them from the equation, and that every single thing must be confirmed verbally. Then we wind up having to ask ourselves, at what point do we have to reestablish this consent? Some of you will be familiar with the rather comedic, and I did quite enjoy this sketch. It was funny. The comedic sketch between Shoe on Head and Armored Skeptic, with as they're mocking, or miming, going at it. Skeptic is off screen, saying, do you solemnly swear that these actions which you're now engaged in are entirely agreeable to you, so on and so forth. You get the point. TJ Kirk, whom I disagree with on a great many issues, also asked this question, saying, well, if a man and a woman are in bed and they're having sex, does the man have to ask consent before each thrust? Does the woman have to voice her consent if she's on top of him? If she's in a position of greater physical dominance, does she have to request his consent for each bounce, if you will? It's one thing to say that consent should be established from the get-go verbally, the start of an interaction. If it was just that, I'm sure a lot more people could get on board. I think they would win over a lot more folks by taking that slightly more moderated approach to this issue, but they don't. They don't. Feminist talking heads prefer to go whole hog with it and aim directly for the no. It must be ongoing verbal consent the whole way through. It has to be a yes repeatedly, but then they provide no time frame for when an individual yes expires. The funny part is that I have no doubt that if you were to ask one of these feminists what they thought about the repetition, the speed at which, or the rate of checking for verbal consent, and what it should be, Marcus Petrushko, gay. Only if it's gay sex. Only if it's two guys fucking. And then I hear it's only if you swallow. But I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that one. But no, at what point do you have to keep asking? And they would probably say, well, that depends on your understanding of your partner and your communication. Well, then doesn't the entire sexual relationship depend on my degree of communication with my partner? At what point does it become your business to tell myself and a partner how we conduct our relationship? We also get into the concept a bit of, well, they like to say, well, and consent can be revoked retroactively after the fact. Well, can consent be retroactively given? Jihad indeed, Ali Blogba. Jihad indeed. Can it be retroactively given? If it can be retroactively revoked, can it be given? That's a question I would like to bandy around a bit. Let's say a woman and a guy, they head up to the bedroom one night. Maybe they're at a party, maybe it's a Tinder hookup, who knows, doesn't matter. The next morning, she looks at him and decides, you know what? Kind of regret doing that. I don't think I would have consented if I had had time to think about it and a number of different variations. And then decides to revoke consent. Say, no, I actually didn't want that. Scenario one. Now, what if another guy, another girl go up to a room and things go a little bit faster than she would have wanted. And in the moment, she says no, or she tries to physically resist him, and he proceeds without her consent at the time. But at some point during the interaction, or even the day after, she looks back on it and for some reason develops a fondness over the issue. Maybe in retrospect she thought he was cute. Maybe he calls her the next day and well, she doesn't think he's that bad of a guy. Looking back, the sex was all right. She wound up enjoying it at one point. Who knows? I'm not saying these have to happen. But the question is, can this same woman turn around the day later and provide her consent? Can she retroactively give consent? Can the man do it? Can the man revoke consent retroactively? Again, these are all questions that get tossed around. Personally, I don't think that either one, the retroactive thing, is reasonable. Because you then remove absolutely all opportunity for someone to respond in a normal human fashion to sexual stimulus and to a scenario that is going to become very, very serious. But I suppose I should get back to the point. Really just wrap this up, sum this up, while a discussion about 90s, early 90s, late 80s entertainment wrestling goes on in my chat here. Marcus, I have no idea why I was referred to you in your recommended sections. Dear God, Allie, no, you do not. In any case, the question here is should it only be available to people to consent through verbal responses, verbal cues, verbal questioning? What about people who cannot actually verbally speak? That was a very I thought I deactivated my Nightbot. I'm almost positive. Oh shit. Oh no. Yes, Marcus. This is absolutely the yes means yes scenario. I am absolutely discussing the yes means yes. Oh, probably the yes means yes. Let me MGTOW stuff. Okay. I apparently classify as a MGTOW, believe it or not. I'm not interested in the concept of marriage as it exists as a government contract in Canada. Not at the moment. If it were to be revised. That's the word I was looking for. So many oh yeahs, it assumed you were looking for more yes. mm. That's not the case. My rejection of Canadian marriage contracts is not really the issue here. It comes down to whether or not the yes means yes laws are valid and whether or not they accurately represent sexual interactions in the real world. And I was going to say something earlier. I'm not sure how I got sidetracked, but of course, as an old friend of mine liked to say, when I get talking on a stream, it goes from I'm going to make a quick point into 6 hours later. Fortunately, we're only at around 25 minutes, 26. My concern for the people advancing these yes means yes laws, for the ones who push the only verbal cues can be accepted. Marcus, I do believe that do me harder counts as a yes. I do believe that is affirmative verbal consent. But I'm concerned, and I legitimately feel a degree of, I wouldn't say pity, but I do feel sorry for people if this is the case. But the impression I get from a lot of the people who push the yes means yes topics, who push the verbal consent only topic, take this point of view, it appears to me through their lack of understanding that intimate partners can communicate on a certain level that does not require verbally spoken consent or anything to be said. Their inability to understand that, comprehend it, I would presume likely comes from the fact that they have not experienced it. And that is likely, potentially at least, no fault of their own. Some people just don't meet a partner with whom they connect to such a degree. Some people never meet that person, and that is a shame because having a relationship like that where you can say so much without having to actually speak, relationships like that are extremely valuable. They are something that tends to greatly improve a person's life. Having someone who understands you so deeply, so so entirely. They know what you're thinking, how you'll respond with as much as a glance. My chat is officially cheering me up. This is fantastic. You guys are awesome. Little levity to a very serious topic. At least it's serious to me. I had a relationship like this. I know, that relationship ended quite poorly, ironically enough. So maybe that's a condemning factor, but I've had others, so shouldn't say I've only had the one. They've not all ended poorly, they've just all ended at some point. People go their own ways. There's a little Maytel reference for you, Marcus. Some people just go their own way. But having been there, having experienced that, and knowing that people who've experienced it will not take this yes means yes, verbal consent only stance. They can't. After having experienced that, there is no way you can look at that as an invalid relationship or an invalid intimate partner dynamic. It really does reinforce my belief that those who push this have never experienced a relationship like that, and I feel sorry for them. I feel sorry that they have not experienced something that is A relationship that is that loving, that is that well communicated, and that well established, that meaningful. Ian, you said here it's whatever I want it to be. Well, I'm going to take it then, as you've allowed me to do so, as being your personal stance that physical cues do not count. That it is at least, only 45% of what our communication is used to convey and how it is conveyed that must decide whether or not consent has been given. Hell, even to that extent, a no spoken in a very particular way could indicate that a person does wish to be pursued further. Somebody playfully bats away and bats at you and goes, "Oh, stop." Smiles, chuckles, bats their eyes as they do it. All the physical cues are there that they're enjoying this interaction and they're more or less just teasing you for a little bit of fun in the middle. But if you were going to say, be absolutely literal about this, that it is only spoken matters that are carried forward here, you would be saying that, well, we have to base all of our interactions, at least in terms of sexual intimacy, on 7% of how human beings communicate as a whole. 7%. That to me seems like you're leaving out a fair bit of context. Nuance, although I fucking hate that word. No, in this case, it really is more context. Context and details. Nuance is not a term I'm fond of anymore. There's really not a whole lot more that I have to say about that, and I'm rather surprised that I was able to get this all out in under 40 minutes, because I do believe I've covered all the points I wanted to hit. One, my petulant joke about sign language or written consent. That's not verbal. It's technically a physical cue. I covered that, admitted the fact that it was a facetious joke, but it does have some slight merit to it. I've covered the fact that I myself have been in relationships and have known of relationships where the partners are close enough that physical cues are all that's needed. This is why ballads and love songs like When You Say Nothing at All or More Than Words, this is why these songs are looked upon so lovingly by so many, is because they do express and they do represent the kinds of relationships that the people who've had them value deeply. People who've had them have a great deal of emotional investment in them. They mean a lot to those people. And finally, well, I don't know how I got here, but I like to say that I have never once seen any affirmative consent in a single porno. Also, I guess I'm a sub now. Well, thank you, Marcus. My final point there, my real overarching statement on all of this is that I find yes means yes laws to be not only immature, not only immature and a sign of ignorance, but damaging to son of a bitch. That absolutely ruined where I was going with that. I thought I had removed my my browser point for the the subscription thing. Shit. Damn it. That's going so well. Marcus, it's entirely your fault. Thank you for the sub, but damn it. Irreverent joke ignorance and immaturity. Billy, get the fuck out. Anyway, ignorance and immaturity, stupid joke that I made. I find the yes means yes laws to be damaging to legitimate intimate partner relationships. I find them to be shameful. I think it's a shame. Not shame. I just think that it is a shame that this sort of legislation is being pushed. And the fact is that if we continue to push that, that becomes the standard. We will be attempting to legislate into non-existence one of the most beautiful things in human interaction, and that is a such a well-developed relationship, an intimate romantic relationship between two partners that doesn't require words to be spoken, that doesn't require these incessant virtue signals about consent and all other stuff. I think that it sets a very dangerous message. I think it devalues true consent. I think it devalues true intimacy. That's pretty much all I have to say on this topic. I've still managed to keep this under 40 minutes, which is a sprint by my streaming standards. But in any case, I'm going to wrap this up now. And I would like to wish you all a great night. And of course, to the tragedy that's gone on that everyone knows about. And yes, I'll comment on this before I go, because I guess this is part of the whole intimate partner thing. Sorry that it happened. Sorry to hear about it. And I hope everybody that needs to finds their closure somehow. Good night, everyone. And again, have a good one.